Distillation is a way to get around that limitation. Distillation has allowed us to take the safety latch off of alcohol because with distillation, you can now ferment something, pull the alcohol off and concentrate it and just keep doing that. And if you use that method, you can get, 90 something percent ABV liquors. And that's just wildly more powerful. It's really a leap in strength to go from 3% ABV to 90.
Yeah.
And this is something that happened very recently. So alcohol has gotten much more dangerous. We have this much more dangerous form of it than we ever had before.
Well, hey, everybody. I am here with Dr. Slingerland. How are you doing, Dr. Slingerland?
Great.
Hey, I'm going to be kind of humble and honest here. In preparation for this conversation, two things. One, I'm very excited. I would consider myself a fan of yours, and we'll kind of get into that. Two, I'm intimidated by your resume or your CV, if you will. Normally, I like to say the credentials of the guests that come on, but would you mind just kind of introducing yourself and who you are and what you find yourself up to in your career these days?
Yeah, so I'm a professor of philosophy at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, and I work on just a lot of different things. My day job is early Chinese philosophy. That's what my earliest research is on. But I do comparative religion, cognitive science of religion, digital humanities, big data, large-scale text analysis. I direct this project called the Database of Religious History, which is a big qualitative, quantitative database of religious belief and behavior around the world. Do a lot of different, it's hard to explain to people what I do. So I follow I get interested in certain problems and I kind of use whatever fields are useful for helping me with those problems.
Yeah. And now anyone listening can hear why I didn't attempt at giving that list of things that he specializes in. But foreshadowing here, one of the things that your words that you like to, you get fascinated with certain problems and you'll research them. You published a book called Drunk, which we were joking a little bit offline. I've been kind of quote unquote after you to come on the show now for 4 or 5 months. So we're finally here and I can't wait to dive in on that. And first, just a little anecdote. You don't know this, Dr. Slingerland, but in research for this conversation, of course, revisited your books, plural, try not to try being one of them. But also I opened up Spotify to the first time I was introduced to you was on your interview with the Joe Rogan Experience. And I was able to see the timestamp of when I actually listened to that episode. And it was in July of 2021, which made me reflect on my life and why that particular conversation was so profound when I listened to it. It also gives some context as to why it's such an honor to be sitting with you here almost 3 years later because of what's happened in my life since then, leaving, corporate life and alcohol being a part of that story and now starting Ultimate Fitness. But I'm going to dive right in and ask this first question. So one of the things or one of the ideas that conversation, that initial conversation with Joe Rogan, one of the questions that it made me ask or made me realize I'm not asking the right question around alcohol. So you don't know this about me, but I struggle with alcohol kind of more or less privately, but my life objectively, I was kind of hitting all the benchmarks, beautiful wife, kids, corporate career, all those things. But I was always asking myself the question, why do I have a quote unquote issue with alcohol? Listening to your conversation and being exposed to your work made me realize that I wasn't asking the right question. The right question fundamentally is, why do I have an issue with intoxicants? Why do I find a haven in or joy from ingesting something that changes my internal state of mind or my consciousness? It's the idea of, as not just me personally, Jesse, but as a species, why do we do this thing? And you, Dr. Slingerland, in your work, you have used the term that is, quote, poison. And I know you use that just as a way to explain that it's not good for us and there are costs. All that is a big, long diatribe, opening question of what have you learned or what can you share about as a species? Why do we gravitate towards intoxicants? And then as we'll let the conversation unfold, but what I want to move towards is why specifically is alcohol such a ubiquitous and potent and even worse, effective intoxicant for the benefits that we're seeking?
So we're a weird species. So part of the setup of Drunk is to explain how unusual we are as a primate. So we're primates, and there's some things about us that look similar to our nearest relatives, chimpanzees, bonobos. But there are ways in which we're complete outliers. One of those ways is our dependence on technology and tools, artificial things, and cultural innovation. So we have to be, humans are inventing new things all the time because we can't live without tools. Literally, we're so dependent on fire, for instance, that we've changed physiologically. Our jaws have changed, our teeth, our digestive tract has changed to adapt to eating cooked meat. So we basically pre-digest our food with fire. And fire is a technology. No baby is born knowing how to make fire. We're oddly dependent on technology and tools, which means we're dependent on creativity and innovation. We're also hypersocial. So we cooperate with strangers on a scale and with an intensity that looks more like social insects, looks more like ants and bees than it looks like chimpanzees. If you're a chimpanzees, you put a bunch of strange chimpanzees. This famous primatologist had a chapter of a book called Chimps on Planes, and argued that if you tried putting a bunch of chimpanzees on a plane, even for a short flight at the other end, you'd just open up and it'd be a tube full of body parts and blood. Like they would just tear each other apart. And yet humans sit and put their seatbelts on and eat their peanuts and, basically obey flight attendants. So we're strangely docile. We're strangely mellow around strangers. We cooperate with people we've never met before. So we're weird as a primate. And this, what I argue in the book, is one of the reasons that we gravitate toward intoxicants. You want to distinguish between proximate and ultimate reasons that we do things. So the proximate reason is the immediate kind of psychological impulsion. So why do we like to get intoxicated? It feels good. It's pleasurable. But the question that I'm asking in Drunk is why does evolution allow it to be pleasurable for us? What the immediate impulse is. So what in your psychology causes you to want to open a beer or smoke a joint? The immediate motivation, which is the proximate causation, is that it's pleasurable. And that's kind of where analyses of chemical intoxicants have stopped. Just like we like it, we do it because we like it. I wanted to ask in Drunk the deeper question of why do we like it? And more specifically, why does evolution allow us to like it? Especially because evolution has the power to make us not like it. We know this is true because there's genetic mutation that causes, it's sometimes called the Asian flushing syndrome, but there's a set of mutations that arose 7 to 10,000 years ago. So it's been popping around in our gene pool for a really long time that makes drinking alcohol not pleasurable. It makes you flush, it makes you nauseous. It's so effective that a chemical that mimics the effects of it is used to treat alcoholism. Evolution could make us not like to drink if it wanted to, and yet it hasn't done that. And so why? And my argument in Drunk is the reason why is because this taste for intoxicants is adaptive in certain ways.
What do you mean by that?
Intoxicants have a function that helps us succeed as both individuals and groups. And that's why, even though it's a poison, even though it's bad for our bodies, even though it can be very dangerous for a subset of the population who have a propensity, it's estimated that anywhere from 10 to 15% of the population has a genetic propensity to alcohol use disorder and has trouble using alcohol. It's a dangerous substance. It's a carcinogen. And yet it has these functions that have kept the taste for it, both in our gene pool and also in our cultural repertoires. The basic point of the book is to first of all, argue that it must have a function, given what a dangerous substance it is, given how bad it is at certain levels for us, and to argue against what's been the standard scientific story, which is that our taste for it is just an evolutionary mistake. That's what you'll read in the Psych 101 textbook. And I'm arguing that it can't be a mistake, given its ubiquity, how ancient it is. There must be some functional benefits to using chemical intoxicants.
Yeah.
And so what are those benefits is really what the focus of the book is.
And you asked my next question because you were using the word functions, and I was going to ask you if it was fair to replace that with benefits, because what the book says and what your argument is there has to be benefits in order for this molecular compound, if you will, to survive evolution, because there's a reason why societally and individually we're using it, right? And by the way, I'm glad you used the word alcohol use disorder. I was feeling you move towards describing it. I wasn't sure if you're going to say alcohol abuse, alcoholism, alcohol use disorder, different things, right? But let's talk about those benefits. And I'm just a quote from the book that jumps out to me, which is, without intoxicants, there's no civilization. Is that the quote? Is that
without
right?
intoxication, there's no civilization. Yeah.
What do you mean by that? That is such a, I don't want to say polarizing comment, but I think most people, if they hear that, would make them go, what does that mean? So let's talk about that, because that's going to get into benefits societally, or the functions societally of alcohol, if you could.
So there's two senses in which I mean that. One has to do with just the history of alcohol. Again, the standard story about the discovery of alcohol was that it was an accident. So we invented agriculture, and we were making bread and grain products, food, and then whatever. Someone left their sourdough starter out for too long, and it started to ferment, and they tasted it, and it made them feel good, and we discovered beer. So the standard story has always been agriculture first, alcohol later as a kind of accidental byproduct.
Hi, I'm Jesse Karajat, founder of Altum Fitness, where our mission is to help you break free from unhealthy habits and mindsets to find true physical and emotional fitness. The Altum Fitness app is a world-class fitness companion offering expertly designed workout programs personalized to any goal and any experience level. By joining this community, you'll gain access to top-notch expert training programs, nutritional guidance, habit change programs, and so much more, all tailored to help you achieve your unique goals. By joining Altum Fitness, you'll also gain access to our exclusive companion community, the Altum Tribe. In the Tribe, you'll find access to expert coaches, habit change programs, live challenges, events, and so much more. It's a space to connect, learn, grow, and be motivated as you navigate your fitness journey. For one low monthly subscription, you'll be granted full access to our fitness app, community, exclusive challenges and content, and so much more. So join Altum Fitness today and become part of our amazing community. Download now, and let's live deep.
That consensus has changed, and it started in the 1950s or so, where people were struggling with these archaeological sites like Göbekli Tepe in present-day Turkey. And this is where, when I brought up Göbekli Tepe with Joe Rogan, he went off on this whole weird thing about aliens. And
15 minutes later.
Yeah, 15 minutes later, I'm like, oh, okay, we're back to
You go, anyway, hunter-gatherer.
Anyway, so yeah, I didn't know. I didn't see that coming. So yeah, I wish I had known, done my research. So yeah, anyway, Göbekli Tepe is a hunter-gatherer site. 10 to 12,000 years old. But what's puzzling about it is this is thousands of years before agriculture. These hunter-gatherers are coming together and building this monumental architecture, doing some kind of religious ceremony. We have no idea what their belief system was or what they were doing. But we know they were doing rituals, and they were feasting. So we have the remains of wild gazelles and all sorts of animals they were eating. And we have these huge vats. So they were also drinking large quantities of some kind of liquid. And we don't have direct chemical evidence from this particular site, but we do from other sites in the region at the same time. We know they were making beer. So the oldest evidence of alcohol production is from this region, and it's 13,000 years old. So we know that they had the technology that were making beer. Sites like this gave rise to what came to be known the beer before bread hypothesis. So the idea that we were motivated to start to settle down and cultivate crops, not for food purposes, but to get high, to get intoxicated. and that it was actually bread that came later. Then we were like, oh, we can also eat this stuff. But the original motivation was that we wanted to make beer. And you see this has been bolstered by the fact that if you look around the world, the first crops that were domesticated seem to have been chosen for their psychoactive properties, not for their nutrition properties. And so this is a very literal sense in which the taste for intoxication gave rise to civilization. Our desire to make more and better beer caused us to start settling down and cultivating crops and gave rise to eventually agricultural societies and everything that comes along with civilization. So there's a direct causal role there.
Would then it also have to be true then the primary diet or nutrition of early hunter-gatherers would be nuts and proteins, animals, things like that?
Yeah, so they were still, so these, to go back to the Tepe people, were now drinking beer. They were gathering together and making beer, but they were still subsisting on wild gazelles and nuts and wild foods. But then people in that region in the Fertile Crescent start slowly transitioning to more of a agriculture only type diet, which was disastrous for us. Early agricultural diet sucks. It's like mostly bread and it's not very healthy. It led to probably a reduction in your average person's well-being. But those groups that had agriculture were very effective and essentially started to take over and conquer or kill off the hunter-gatherers around them and this is the pattern we see, basically agriculturalists have taken over all the good places in the world. The remaining hunter-gatherers tend to be in places where just the climates aren't that great and agriculturists don't want to go. So it was the transition from hunter-gatherer life to large-scale civilizations based on agriculture was very successful, but at least in the early stages probably wasn't great for most individuals.
And the reason that these we'll call it tribes, or these people that were organizing around these rituals and doing those things, is that organization, that building a society around this thing, is that what made them stronger and therefore able?
Absolutely. And so that's then gets to the second. So there's this direct causal connection. We want to get intoxicated, we create agriculture. That's a very direct link. The more diffuse connection is that in order to pull this off, so in order to live in large scale societies, in order to bond with strangers and create an identity that's bigger than just your genetic relatives and your friends, we needed some tools for doing that. And alcohol is one of those tools. So the two main kind of civilization enhancing functions of alcohol that I talk about are creativity and bonding. Alcohol enhances creativity. There's this, if you look across the world throughout history, you see this connection between artists and poets and alcohol. And this is not a myth. There's actually, so I walk through the modern scientific evidence that alcohol is an aid to creativity. Alcohol has two main functions that I focus on. One is downregulating, depressing the function of the prefrontal cortex. So this is this part of your brain that is the last part of your brain to develop. It's the last part of you to develop. It doesn't fully mature until you're in your 20s, mid-20s, which is crazy when you think about it. You're sexually mature, whatever age, and it's not until your mid-20s that you actually have a fully matured prefrontal cortex.
Yeah, scary thought.
Yeah, well, that's why teenagers are so dangerous. It's an important part of the brain. It's what allows you to delay gratification, to stay focused on a task, suppress instincts that you don't want to follow, and to substitute different behaviors. It's crucial to being a successful adult. But one problem it causes is it reduces our creativity. So there's this, I will look at the work of Alison Gopnik, who's a developmental psychologist at Berkeley. And she's shown that when it comes to creativity tasks that require insight, so they require you to connect things that are otherwise not connected, or basically thinking outside the box, coming up with something that's really divergently creative. Little kids are great at this. So in these creativity tasks, like 5-year-olds smoke adults on these creativity tasks. They see the solution right away, and it takes adults a really long time. So she shows that our ability to solve these tasks goes down in a linear fashion with age. And what I do in the book is overlay a diagram showing the maturation of the prefrontal cortex. So basically, as our prefrontal cortex gets stronger, we become less creative. I think this is why evolution kind of slow walks the development of the PFC. We need to have it, but not right away, because we want to remain creative and open to new experiences and learning from our culture and learning languages until as late as possible. So there's a design trade-off. Evolution wants us to have a PFC so that we can get up on time and get to work and focus on things, but it's got some downsides to it. And so one of the things that alcohol does is allow us as adults on a temporary basis go back developmentally to being more like a 5-year-old. So if you can shut down, depress the function of the PFC, you can start to regain that mental flexibility that children have. So one of the things alcohol does is make us creative again, like we used to be when we were kids.
Is creativity one of the only benefits or function that alcohol can help with? Is it just the creative piece? Are there like lowering inhibitions, anything else?
No, it's doing all sorts of stuff. So it's making us more creative. It's lowering inhibitions. And this actually helps with group innovation, because if I'm individually more creative, but I'm also less inhibited, I'm going to say, hey, why don't we do X? When maybe if I were sober, I would think that was stupid or be worried about people judging me. I don't care now. I'll just throw out some ideas. And so this is why it's so helpful for group innovation. The other thing it does is simultaneously, as alcohol depresses the PFC, it's boosting the production of these kind of feel-good chemicals in our body. So endorphin, serotonin. This gets to the other main civilization function of alcohol, which is helping us cooperate and bond. I meet you. I want you, you want to join my religious group. You would come to Göbekli Tepe and you want to join the party and you want to worship our animal gods or whatever it is we're doing. I need to know that you're really sincerely on board, because the best strategy for you as an individual would be if you could fake commitment to our religion or a group, get all the benefits of being part of our group. But then as soon as things go sideways, as soon as some other group attacks and we're in trouble, you scamper away and leave us, right? That would be the best strategy for you. So I want to know that you're really sincerely committed. If you're going to try to lie to me about that, you need your PFC firing at full force, because lying is an incredibly PFC heavy function. If you're lying to me about something, you need to simultaneously keep in your head what you're telling me is true and what you know to be true. You have to make sure that all of your facial expressions and your emotional reactions match what you're telling me is true. And any emotional reactions that contradict that are true but don't match your story, you've got to suppress those. It's a really PFC heavy thing to lie. So if before I ask you about if you really believe in our animal gods and want to become part of the team, we sit down and have a couple beers, I'm now shifting the balance in favor of being able to tell if you're bullshitting me, basically. I've essentially disarmed you cognitively. You are now less able to trick me into trusting you when I shouldn't. And at the same time, I'm making you feel good about yourself and about me and about other people, because I'm boosting these feel-good chemicals.
So you're lowering the ability, I'll use a word here, but you're lowering someone's ability to manipulate while also making them feel relaxed and more likely to be honest.
Yeah. You're making it harder to cheat or lie, and you're also making it less likely for someone to want to do that in the first place. So it's a truth serum, but it's also a group bonding mechanism. This is why, again, across the world throughout history, whenever you see potentially hostile individuals or people with potentially divergent interests trying to figure something out or come to an agreement, they sit down and they drink first before they even start talking about anything. You see this from ancient times and down to modern business meetings, right? This is why I argue in the book this is why when Skype, everyone thought, oh, business travel is going to disappear because why would I get on a plane and fly from London to Shanghai when I could just Skype with people and sign a contract virtually? It took a global pandemic to have any kind of effect on business travel because, in fact, if I'm going to enter into a deal with you, anything more complex than just buying paper clips from you, I want to make sure that you really are who you say you are. And I'm only going to feel confident about that if I can sit physically in a room with you and drink alcohol and eat some food and suss you out. And so people, they want to get a read on other people. And
Sure.
it's a crucial way to do it.
When I makes me just kind of think back and self-reflect, the desire, or I would say the impulse for someone to move towards alcohol as an intoxicant when they have to deal with either social pressure or business pressure, it's not something I think that you consciously do. You learn that it can help you and you just do it. You're putting words and understanding to it, but it reminds me of when I was in college. And I don't have this issue anymore. I can't even understand why I did, but I had a real strong fear for public speaking. And unfortunately for me, by the time I was in college, I was a very well-researched alcohol drinker.
Okay.
I tell my wife sometimes as an aside, like one of the benefits of me doing what I'm doing now, venturing to this space, is that I can finally put some usefulness to the years of research that I have.
The years of research,
testing alcohol and whatnot. But I remember being a junior at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and it didn't matter if it was an 11 o'clock a.m. Presentation that I had to give. I had to drink alcohol before I walked into that presentation. And I didn't need to know at the time what was happening in my prefrontal cortex to understand why, but it was potent and it was effective. And I found that when I went up there, even if it was 2 or 3 beers or drinks, my consciousness, I was fluid. I wasn't nervous. I was effective. I was creative on the fly. And only in hindsight did I start to realize that there was something going on there. That there was something powerful happening there. And you're helping to kind of articulate what was happening there.
Hey, everybody. It's your host, Jesse Karajak. Quick interruption of this podcast. Look, there's a multitude of ways that we all can and should look to improve our drinking habits, right? And we talk about them all the time on this show. Things like getting in a group, being honest with people, focusing on sleep and nutrition and exercise. I can go on and on. But what most people don't know, and frankly, I didn't know, is that there is an FDA-approved medication that you can start taking. It's easily accessible and private and affordable, and you can start taking it today and start experiencing powerful benefits within days. And again, I've done it. I'm blown away by it. And I want to get the word out so that as many people as possible know that is an option that they can and should use. So there's a company called Or Health. That's OAR Health. You can text STRENGTH, that's STRENGTH, to 710710. Again, that's STRENGTH to 710710. You'll get a secure link. You can fill out an assessment. And if the medication is right for you, a licensed medical professional will prescribe it for you and privately, discreetly have it shipped to your home. You'll be one of over 35,000 people that have decided to take back control of their drinking through Or Health. And 76% of Or Health members report drinking less within just 2 weeks. So if you've been struggling, know that there is an incredibly powerful option out there for you. So again, strength to 710710 to see if it's a fit. And now back to the show.
Yeah, actually, the first time I ever had to lecture to a large classroom, I was a TA in this class. And the professor was gone 1 week, and he had me give the lecture to a 150-person classroom, and I was terrified. I'd never given a lecture to a group that large, and this was like a 10 a.m. lecture. I ended up bringing a little shot of vodka with me. So we used to have film canisters back when we used physical film, these little plastic containers, and I filled one of those with vodka and did a shot before I went out. And it helped because what it's doing is reducing your inhibitions. It's reducing your self-monitoring. So the biggest problem you have if you're nervous about public speaking is you're thinking, wow, is what I said just stupid?
Yeah.
Are people listening to me? Did that make sense? Like you're constantly monitoring yourself and judging yourself.
And they tell that I don't have it all together, and you're
Can they
not.
see that I'm nervous? Self-monitoring is deadly for public speaking. And alcohol turns that off or turns it down. It's boosting your confidence because you've got serotonin and endorphins going. So you're feeling like you do after a good run or something. You're feeling energized. It's effective for that. So you just stumbled on it, as did I. I mean, I didn't know any of the things I know now about the functions of alcohol. I think it was a friend of mine. I was really nervous, and a friend of mine was like, "Dude, just do a shot before you go out there." And they were totally right.
Good friends.
So,
Sometimes they're good.
yeah.
Sometimes they're not.
Sometimes they're not.
Yeah, and I think with with alcohol, for me anyway, it wasn't just turning off negative emotions. It also helped me. It became a crutch socially to turn down that same mechanism in my mind that was. Did you say self-monitoring? I discovered it inadvertently, but also in my research. Going back to something you said earlier, it's that it helps with creativity. You gave an example there, hypothetically, of a person in a group who might not speak up with an idea, but did so because those inhibitions are lowered, and all of a sudden maybe that idea blossoms into something that is useful and helps either as a group, right? But I also know in my research that window of useful feedback is very short and very small, because you could blow right through it and get to another area, right?
Well, especially if you're doing distilled liquors. So that's another part of the book, is the dangers of the fact that we have access to alcohol in this crazily potent form that we never had before. For most of our evolutionary history, we've been drinking like 2 to 3% ABV beers and then maybe slightly stronger fruit wines. You can drink 2% beer, you can drink all day long and never get dangerously drunk. You'll stay. So most of the benefits of alcohol that I talk about come in about 0.08 blood alcohol content. Mm-hmm. So for most people, that's maybe 2 beers. So alcohol has historically come with a safety feature, built-in safety feature, which is that natural fermentation can only get so strong. Through natural fermentation, you can only get to a certain alcohol level, and the alcohol shuts down the yeast and alcohol production stops. That's why beers and wines can only get so strong. So we've been relentlessly breeding yeast to be stronger and stronger so we can make stronger and stronger beers and wines. But there's still a limit. We've maxed out at this point at about 16% ABV. Distillation is a way to get around that limitation. Distillation has allowed us to take the safety latch off of alcohol, because with distillation, you can now ferment something, pull the alcohol off and concentrate it, and just keep doing that. And if you use that method, you can get 90-something% ABV liquors, and that's just wildly more powerful than anything we've ever had. It's not a qualitative change. It's really a leap in strength to go from 3% ABV to 90. And this is something that happened very recently. So we haven't had access, at least in the West, we haven't had access to distilled liquors your average person didn't have access to it until the 1600s, really, which in the story that I'm telling, which is starts 10 million years ago, that's just yesterday. So alcohol has gotten much more dangerous. We have this much more dangerous form of it than we ever had before. The other thing that's changed is that historically, we only had access to alcohol in a communal setting. You would only drink alcohol in public. In cultures where they made alcohol in the private home, so there were cultures in South America, for instance, where you brewed chicha in your house, there were taboos against drinking your own alcohol. You had to go to your neighbor's house to drink. So alcohol consumption's always been public and typically governed by these very strict ritual guidelines. And so I talk about the Greek symposium where the host would pass around the wine, and they would decide when to pass the wine around, and they would decide how much water to add to it to water it down. In Chinese cultures, from ancient times down to today, you don't drink at will. So if you're at a banquet, you don't just sit there drinking as much as you want. You only drink when someone makes a toast. And who makes a toast is ritually determined. It's not just anyone can make a toast. So we have all these ways of controlling each other's drinking. Even think about it like a modern pub environment, you typically drink in rounds, right? So if I have alcohol problems and I suck down my beer really quick because I want another one, I have to wait until you guys are done and we order another round. And so we have all these ways of helping moderate each other's alcohol consumption when we're doing it socially, publicly. That safety feature gets disabled when we can drive our SUV to a drive-through liquor store and have them throw a case of tequila in the back and take it home and just have it in our house. Like you could just sit in front of a TV and drink as much tequila as you want. That's crazy. Like that affordance, the ability to do that never existed before.
I don't think people realize that. I don't think
Yeah.
people, it just, because it's so ubiquitous and common and culturally in America. It's, and you know this, it's, if you don't drink, it's not good for you. It's why you must have a problem. But I'm so glad we went here, because if I had to pick three things I wanted to go to, it's just to really articulate that to the listeners, that this modern invention of A, access, and B, the strength of what we have access to. And just for you, and back to you here, and I know I interrupted you, but would you say that it's the access and our agency now that contributes towards modern alcohol abuse?
It's clear that, I mean, the ancient Chinese and ancient Egyptians talked about alcohol use disorder, essentially. They talked about people who were incapacitated because of their taste for alcohol. So that's clearly existed since we've been using alcohol.
Good point. Yeah. In the Bible too.
Yeah, but it's much worse now. So these trends, I call them in the book the twin banes of modernity: distillation and isolation. So the fact that we have distilled liquors and the fact that we can have access to them at will in our homes without anyone supervising us. That's completely new, and it just puts so much more pressure on individuals to control their own drinking. Because if you have, alcoholic tendencies and you have a liquor cabinet full of liquor and no one's home and you're home and you can drink as much as you want, that's a lot to ask of an individual to control themselves in that situation.
Especially if said individual has mental health issues or something happening in their life, when they know they have an effective tool in their cupboard somewhere.
Yeah, it's right there, and you can have as much of it as you want. And that's just it's entirely new thing. And historically, if I wanted to drink, I would have to wait until the ritual was happening, and I would go and I would get a ritually stipulated amount of alcohol, and that was it. And then I couldn't have any more until tomorrow. And so even if I wanted more, I couldn't have more. That's really effective in helping people regulate their drinking. And that's completely gone out the door now in our modern world. So that's where I do think, I'm arguing in the book that alcohol has been this very important tool for us. We've been using it since we've been doing anything organized as a species. But it's a tool that's become more dangerous in like the last couple 100 years. But particularly with modern Western industrialized consumer societies, where we can go down to the local 7-Eleven and get distilled liquor and take it home with us. Like you can go down to a corner store and carry out with you enough alcohol to literally kill a small village of people. And that's crazy. That just never existed before.
It's only crazy if you actually pull up and know the history of how recent that innovation, that retail wise, you can have access to that potent of a poison. Real quick on a personal level, I had 2 seasons of my life where I would say that I was struggling mightily with alcohol. The first season was pre Marine Corps. I was a teenager. There was dysfunction in my life. I was getting in trouble. I'll say I was doing a lot of research, Dr. Slingerland, around alcohol.
Okay, right.
Getting to know the local justice system a little bit.
Okay.
And that was because of just things going on internally, right? But then the later season, which is more relevant to this, is, you flash forward 20 years, but I'm a working professional. My career is flourishing, having children. With children and career flourishment, you have responsibilities. With responsibilities comes pressure. And
Yeah.
sometimes when you can't manage the pressure, what I did was I turned to a familiar foe, not a friend, to help kind of like cope with that. And all that to say, the problem was I had access when I needed it, quote unquote, in my house. And one of the first things we do with Ultimate, our app, we have this thing called an alcohol reset. It's 30 days just to help people get through 30 days dry, if you will. Day one, step one, remove all alcohol from your house.
Yeah, that seems really wise.
Because if it's not there, you won't choose it, right? Or
Yeah.
you're going to have to hide the fact that you're choosing it and find a way to manipulate to get it, which most people don't want to do. So anyway, all that to say, strikes home personally with me, but back to kind of the more research part of it. I want to go backwards real quick and then go into more of the individual kind of like part of alcohol, right? But how is it that you have, going way back, because you mentioned millions and millions of years ago, but how is it that you have alcohol popping up and emerging in these societies across the world that are not connected? Is there a common theme that people, I mean, you already talked about it a little bit, but like talk us through like where it was, how it popped up all over the world and then kind of got to where now it seems there's kind of commonalities around alcohol use, if that makes sense.
It's for the same reason that people all over the world independently invented cups to hold liquids and invented spears and chose to throw the spears with the pointy part forward. There's like certain just things that people converge on. The philosopher Dan Dennett calls it good tricks. It's just basically you got humans, you have the environment. These things are going to emerge independently and reliably because they're good tricks. They work. And so humans, to me, the powerful arguments for the function of alcohol is this ubiquity, the fact that you find it everywhere, even in unconnected cultures. And also that in the few parts of the world where you don't have alcohol, you see people using another chemical intoxicant that has very similar effects in a very similar way, which suggests that there's this functional niche that has to be filled. And if alcohol is not filling it, something else is. So in parts of the Pacific, they use kava, this intoxicant called kava. In other parts of the world, they use cannabis. In North America, they didn't use alcohol. They used hallucinogen-laced tobacco, potent stimulant combined with an intoxicant. And they used it in exactly the same way that people use alcohol, right? The peace pipe. So you have potentially hostile people and need to agree on something. You don't start talking until everyone sits down and gets a little bit high first. It's something human cultures across the world and throughout time have independently discovered in the same way they discover sewing and cooking food and these other things that we've all figured out independently.
Yeah. And you've referred to alcohol as the king of intoxicants before. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that as to why? I mean, we already mentioned, prefrontal cortex and some of the quote unquote functions, but other reasons why I say people maybe who experiment with a cannabis and an alcohol and anything else, for some reason, the common theme is they'll land with alcohol and stay there.
Hey everybody, sorry to interrupt this episode. It's your host, Jesse Karajet, and I've got a quick favor to ask. If you're enjoying this episode, would you please consider subscribing to the show and leaving a rating and review? That simple act goes such a long way to help us grow the show, reach more people, and make a positive impact in their lives. So thank you for considering, and now back to the show.
Yeah, so cannabis is another candidate. So you can think of them as competing cultural technologies to fill this niche, right? To help us downregulate the PFC, upregulate these feel-good hormones. Cannabis has got a lot of advantages over alcohol. So it's a lot less physiologically damaging. And I think crucially, it's not physically addictive. So the biggest problem with alcohol is that it's physically addictive, and cannabis is not. It can be psychologically addictive, but not, the same physical craving. So it seems like a better drug in that regard. There are two fatal problems with cannabis, though. One is that it's very hard to dose. So if you're smoking it, you've got to be able to know how to kind of hold it in your lungs. And if you're not breathing in deeply enough or holding it deeply, you're going to get a completely different dose than someone who knows how to smoke. If you're eating it, if you're taking it in edible form, the delay between when you take it and onset is so long that you often misdose. Those are notoriously, people take some edibles and then they're like, I'm not feeling anything. And then they take some more and they're like, oh no, I take too much. So it's hard to dose. Whereas alcohol, especially because, again, historically, you're drinking the same beverage that your father drank, that your grandparents drank, that everyone's been drinking for generations. You know exactly what it's going to do to you. And it does it very quickly. So you get feedback right away. But I think the really crucial thing is that cannabis has really wildly different effects on different people. Yeah. I had friends in grad school who would smoke and want to talk about philosophy or go out dancing, or, they made them energized and intellectually curious and outgoing universally. And again, now that cannabis has been legalized, I've been able to try every strain known to mankind in every kind of dosage, in every delivery form possible. And just universally, it just makes me really paranoid. And then I fall asleep. It's a terrible drug. Which sucks. I mean, I wish. The other advantage of cannabis is 0 calories. So I really would prefer that over alcohol as I get middle age and kind of my metabolism slows down. But it's a terrible drug for me. And so you can't have as your social drug something that makes some people extroverted and happy and outgoing, and some people paranoid misanthropes who fall asleep. So there's a reason that alcohol has been the drug of choice. And because we've had cannabis for a really long time, probably at least 6,000 years and probably longer than that. But it's not as good a technology as alcohol for those reasons.
Yeah, I at times, I'm like you, by the way. I take shots before speeches, and I tried marijuana and it didn't work. But
it didn't work.
At times, I almost wish that I wasn't wired that way, because I think if I were able to replace the benefit that I'm getting from drinking with something else, I probably wouldn't have wrestled with alcohol so long. I have a friend who very, very successfully, success defined as he's not drinking anymore, replaced one habit with another. And he would rave about it. If you were on the show with us, he would tell you about all the benefits of it. So I tried, in certain times when I tried to cut back alcohol, I tried edibles, I tried different things. And no matter what I did, I just had an anxiety, like a baseline of paranoia. It was uncomfortable. Sometimes it lasted too long. I didn't know what I was doing, and it just didn't work. So
I feel stupid. I feel like I'm
self-conscious,
stumbling over my words. I'm super self-conscious. Yeah, it's horrible. It's a terrible drug, which is, again, a shame. And I've experimented with different strains because I really want to like cannabis. I would like to not have to worry about the calories of the intoxicant I'm eating, because I've got the little middle-aged paunch that I would like to get rid of. But it's not a good drug for me. And there's a lot of people like that. So that's why alcohol, I call it the king of intoxicants. It's not a perfect drug, but it's the best one functionally and in terms of its universality of function on different individuals, its ease of dosage, the fact that you can make it so easily out of almost anything. It's easy to discover. Rotten fruit will start to ferment naturally. There's just no drug like it. And that is why it's become really the universal drug.
Yeah. And still a poison.
And of course, poison, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to encourage everybody, and I'll link to it in the show notes. Read the book, because that's where you can really dive into all of your great work and just understand how alcohol has risen to be the king of intoxicants, not just where I'm sitting and where you're sitting in Dr. Slingerland, but across the world, because it's such fascinating. I think if you're curious about alcohol, or maybe more importantly, curious about what relationship is good for you with alcohol, I think it really it helps to understand what it is and where it came from. Just in this conversation, understanding that this powerful, these highly, highly toxic versions of alcohol have only been around for, a couple hundred years, and we're not equipped to really manage those and everything. So encourage everyone to read the book to dive deeper on those areas. And Dr. Slingerland, I'll preface the final 2 questions this way. You do not claim to be someone who is in the, quote, business or field of self-help or therapy or making recommendations for people to understand what role, if any, alcohol should play in their life. That's not who you are, and you don't claim to be that. However, because of your work and your research and conversations and exposure to people like me and anyone else on this journey, you do have a lot of wisdom on the topic in terms of interpersonal costs, or maybe personal costs that alcohol could have. So 2 questions for you. It's a great big preface. The first one is around moderate drinking in moderation. The previous guest, Veronica Valley, she's the host of the Soberful podcast. She is a staunch advocate for zero alcohol ever. I asked her the question, and this is the question I'm going to ask you, is there a futility, a usefulness? Is there a role for moderate drinking in society and people's lives? Her answer to me, quote, was, "That's bullshit."
Okay.
And a lot of people respect her and follow her,
Yeah.
and myself included. Right. So same question to you. Assuming the costs aren't so obviously outweighing any benefits, if someone's sitting at home trying to figure out and answer that question, what role should alcohol have in my life? Do you believe that there can be a healthy relationship with alcohol?
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a healthy relationship with alcohol for most of our history as a species. And there are cultures that know how to do this better than other cultures. So in the book, I talk about northern versus southern drinking cultures, and this is referring to Europe. So northern drinking cultures focus on distilled liquors. They drink to get drunk. They drink without eating meals with the drinking. They're just drinking. They drink in single sex groups typically, so a bunch of dudes together, a bunch of women together to get drunk. It's forbidden to children, so alcohol is a kind of taboo thing. In cultures like this, so this is, it's also Eastern Europe, so Russia, Slavic countries, Northern European countries, it gets inherited by America and other British colonies. So you see this in Australia and New Zealand as well. Problem drinking is rife. So it really seems to lend itself toward alcohol abuse, as opposed to Southern European cultures. So these cultures focus more on beer and wine. And one very clever trick they've come up with is you only drink at the meal table. You don't drink away from the meal table. You drink in mixed groups. So it's the whole family, and it's the kids, and it's the grandparents. Kids get introduced to alcohol at an early age in watered down form. So Italy's the instance of this that I know the best, because my ex-wife is half Italian. We spent a lot of time in Italy. Kids get a little bit of wine watered down with the meal, and it kind of teaches them it's just a normal thing people do with food. You don't take the alcohol away from the meal table. I remember the first time I went and met the Italian side of the family, and we had this amazing meal, and I was drinking this incredible Italian red that was just, I was living in Canada where you can't get anything good. And I was just like, this is fantastic. And so I wanted to take a glass up to my room to take notes on it, tasting notes on it. And so I poured myself a little extra and went off toward the stairs with my glass of wine, and everyone looked at me like, what the fuck is he doing? Like, what's wrong with that guy? Because you don't drink away from the meal table. Drinking in northern cultures, the point is to get drunk, and you're not doing it right if you're not drunk. In southern cultures, getting drunk is shameful. Getting to the point where you're visibly drunk, if you're stumbling or you're slurring, that's shameful. No grown-up does that. And so when you have a culture like that, it helps you to drink responsibly.
Yeah.
We're only going to drink wine. We're only going to drink it with food. We're only going to drink it in a mixed group together with the meal. We're socially regulating each other, helping each other drink moderately. I also remember at one point, going to pour myself some more wine, and kind of my mother-in-law at the time looking at me and kind of, so you get these social signals. They're like, oh, maybe I won't hit the wine so hard. We have all these subtle ways we kind of help each other drink moderately. And so I think we can learn from cultures that do this well. That you look, so Italy is I had trouble tracking down the reference for this, but I did read this study. Italy, at least at the time when the study was published, was per capita consumed the most alcohol in Europe, but they had one of the lowest alcoholism rates.
My next
alcohol use
question.
disorder
My next
rates.
question was: does the data and the outcomes support the notion that
The data supports it, and what's really interesting is,
Wow.
one hypothesis is, well, the Italians are just genetically less prone to alcoholism than other people. The nice control, kind of inadvertent control study of this was looking at Italian Americans. So Italians moved to America, first generation born in America, alcoholism rates go up to baseline US levels. So it's not genetic, it's cultural. You have this cultural practice that protects you from alcohol use disorder. You take those people and you put them in a new cultural environment, and they go up to US dangerous levels. So it really is these cultural practices. You see it even, I had this really interesting podcast interview with someone who was from Montreal. He noticed there was like basically nightclubs on opposite sides of the street, and one was Anglophone and one was Francophone. So again, great controlled experiment, because same city, same part of the city, but the Anglophone nightclub the cops would be there 2 or 3 times a night, breaking up fights. People would get drunk, people would break things. The Francophone nightclub, people drank wine and they just danced and they were mellow. And it's because, France is a southern drinking culture and Britain is a northern drinking culture. So drinking cultures matter. So I think there are ways to learn from these cultures that use alcohol responsibly.
Yeah, we're very much indoctrinated into the culture and the practices that surround us, right? Irish Catholic, Jersey Shore in New Jersey.
Jersey Shore, really? Oh God, yeah, that's where I'm from. I'm from the Jersey Shore too.
Is that right? What town?
Tom's River.
Bricktown.
Brick. You're from Brick. Okay, we used to wrestle against Brick. Yeah.
Yeah, played football against all the Tom's Rivers, the South, the East, the North. I should have asked you that ahead of time.
I was Tom's River North. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So then you know where we grew up, and
I know the drinking culture there.
Temptation and all that, right? Wow. Yeah. Small world. Final question, if I could, and feel free to answer as concisely if you like. But I don't know your personal connection with alcohol abuse other than what you've disclosed, which is like you've had it in your family and you know people who most of us do, and you don't have to disclose. But that said, how might someone assess whether the costs are outweighing the benefits? Could be an obvious question, but I want to hear it from you and your perspective there.
I think if you feel like you don't have control over your alcohol consumption, that's worrisome. If you feel that you'd like to cut back because whatever, weight gain or for other reasons, but you find yourself making excuses to keep drinking the same amount you used to drink, that's worrisome. I think if you find yourself it impairing your daily life, you're waking up hungover, you're not as effective at work because you were drinking the night before. There are all these reasons, or you become dependent on it as a crutch. I used that shot of vodka the first time I gave a public lecture because I was so nervous, but it just got me over the hump. And then, I lecture on a regular basis. And if I had to do a shot of vodka every time I gave a lecture, I'd have a problem. So, if you need it as a crutch in a way that's really unhealthy, it's super dangerous. The Greeks worshiped Dionysus, but they were scared of Dionysus too. And Dionysus could give you gifts that were not gifts in the end. So he's the one who gave Midas the golden touch, which didn't work out very well for Midas. So most cultures, every culture I know of who uses alcohol is respectful of its potential danger. And so I think what I'm trying to do in Drunk is not be a cheerleader for alcohol or say everyone should drink. Some people really shouldn't drink. Some people should be extra vigilant about using alcohol. What I'm hoping to do with Drunk is at least give people the tools to think intelligently about what the role of alcohol should be in either their personal life or their organization. If you're in charge of a company or whatever, you have to decide, are we going to have alcohol at the holiday party, or are we going to go out for drinks, as a team? I think up until now, we've been flying blind. The only information we've had is about the cost. And the only decision-making relevant information we've been using is kind of minimizing risk, minimizing lawsuits. And, we're very aware of drunk driving and sexual harassment and all the bad things that can happen when you throw alcohol into the mix. We've been intuitively aware. The only reason we do it is because we've been intuitively aware that it helps with creativity and it helps us bond. And so with Drunk, what I'm trying to do is actually lay out the data on the creativity and the bonding and the positive effects. And then once you have the data, you actually see the benefits as well as the costs. You can then make an intelligent decision about whether or not you want to include alcohol in your life. And that's going to also be an individually inflected decision because it really, people individually differ in their genetic propensity to alcohol use disorder. And so I know people who have had no problem using alcohol. They use it when it's there. They enjoy it. They don't need it. And I know people who really have a problematic relationship with alcohol. You're the best as an individual to judge where you are on that spectrum. But it does have a strong genetic component. So, looking at your family can help you figure that out too.
Yeah. Well said. You're helping people see the whole playing field before they make a move on the field and make the right decision. I love that. Dr. Slingerland, what are you up to this year? Anything you're working on? What are you excited about? Any projects or books or anything like that?
I'm trying to finish writing an academic book that no one would be interested in, your listeners. But I want to get that finished because I want to move to the next book, the next trade book, which will be another general audience book, which will be a defense of intelligent hedonism, kind of pushing back against what I feel like is this kind of neo-Puritan, neo-aesthetic trend in our culture where everything's got to be to maximize kind of our efficiency and effectiveness and sunrise yoga and healthy habits and at a certain point it's like, well, but we should enjoy life too.
Yeah, amen.
We shouldn't just be efficiency machines, and there's something to be said for just pleasure. The next book's going to be a defense of pleasure.
Speaking right to my soul on two topics: first, drunk, and now questioning effectiveness and efficiency as an idol. And what's needed? You got me. I'll be an early buyer. Right. So thanks for investing some time. I really appreciate it, everyone. Dr. Edward Slingerland.
All right, everybody, that's the show, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Sober Strength podcast and spending some time with us today. We've got a favor to ask. If you enjoyed the show, would you please consider subscribing to the show and even leaving a rating and review? That simple act drastically helps us reach more people in our mission to help them live better, longer, healthier lives. You can also follow us if you'd like on Instagram and YouTube for regular tips and motivation around mental health, addiction, and so much more. Know that your support fuels our brand and is greatly appreciated. So until next time, stay strong and live deep.